Everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing the tier list for 11-14 for supports. As always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check us out on YouTube every night, starting around 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, usually going till about 2 or 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you. I try to be as conversational as possible while also trying to play the game to the best of my ability. And then we also have tons and tons of guides, tier lists, patch notes, coaching sessions, just lots and lots of other league content, so check all that out. We're also going to get back into doing some more Total War Warhammer content, legendary campaigns, if you're interested in watching that. And then finally, as of recent, I have been playing WoW Burning Crusade Classic, doing some raiding as a Restoration Druid. If you want to check that out, that's Wednesdays and Thursdays. If you want to see what that game's like, or just come by, chill, you can still chat about League or Warhammer or whatever if you want while I'm raiding, and I'll try to talk to you as much as I can while I'm doing that as well. And then we're also getting into Final Fantasy XIV. If you're interested in that, I'm going to be releasing sort of a video series on the leveling process, and then eventually hope to do some raiding in that as well. So anyways, lots and lots of different games. You want to check all that out. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So I don't think a ton has changed on this patch, to be honest. I thought maybe there'd be a bit more of a shakeup over the last couple of patches with the changes to Shirelia's, but that's still going to be the dominant item on a lot of champions. The new item seems to be situational, okay to some extent, and not really that great in other places. The one, I forgot the name of it, the one that like reduces the damage dealt to you by a single target by 30% that you stack up over a minute, and it's got health on it and ability haste. Most of the time, as a support, you want to be getting something that helps your allies out, and most of the time that's still going to be Zeke's on a lot of tanks, so it's usually just going to be lock it into Zeke's. And there could be some other options. I still think that Frozen Heart and Abyssal Mask are really underutilized on some champions, but very, very few supports are getting that item. Although I have seen some top laners getting some of those, or getting that health item occasionally, but sorry, it's raining outside and I've got the window cracked and I'm trying to decide if I want to leave it cracked or not. There was a little bit of water getting in on a couple of books there, but I do like the rain. Just move this, and that'll probably be okay. Like hearing kind of the rain in the background there. So the meta hasn't moved up too much, but I do want to talk about a couple of things that maybe have shifted around a little bit. Okay, so first up we have Lulu. Still going to be very good. Her win rate has gone down a little bit over time, but she's still going to be really solid, especially if you pair her with a hyper carry, so like a Jinx or a Twitch or a Kog'Maw, just something that wants to attack a lot and that gains a ton of benefit out of that extra bonus attack speed that she gives on her Whimsy, on her W. Then her passive, the on hit, it's on attack bonus, does a lot. It's like 80 damage around, level 10, level 11, depending on how much AP you have. It's very, very strong. So anything that attacks quickly, she's going to be very good with that. She's also good against a lot of these somewhat squishy melee fighter type of champions, like a Riven, a Fiora, things like that, with her polymorph. So then her ultimate does give her a nice little infusion of health that gets around grievous wounds, helps protect against assassination. So overall, she's very solid. The only downsides to Lulu are that early on, she is very squishy. It's getting pretty intense out there. Better go ahead and close that window. She's very squishy early on, so if she gets engaged on in the early game by something like a Leona or a Nautilus, or gets caught by a Zyra or something like that, she can get blown up. And her ranges are very small. So I think her shield range is like 650, and I believe that's the same on the W. So you have to kind of get in close, and you could get hit by things or just be out of position to try to do that. So that is a little problematic versus something like Janna. The shield range is 800, so you can stand much further back. So really good offensive capabilities for buffing up your allies, but you are going to be vulnerable to flanks, and your range does make you vulnerable to some, AoE situations or against gap closers and things like that. So still very, very good. A lot of people would consider her top notch. That's part of the reason why she's banned pretty much all the time, is because if you do not punish her and the Kog'Maw, the Jinx, or whatever she's paired with in lane, she's probably going to take over the game. So you're kind of on the clock when you're facing a Lulu. Build path has stayed pretty much the same. You just want to go Ionians. If you do want to roam, it looks like Mobies are doing a little bit better right now. I haven't really tried that style. It's nice. It's tough to give up Ionians, though. I mean, 20 ability haste is massive, and then even the summoner spell haste, like getting an extra ignite or exhaust or even flash, can sometimes be huge. So the ability haste particularly is really, really good on her because her signature ability, the W, is a 12-second cooldown at max rank, and it's really powerful, but it's a really long wait on it. So that really could be a huge difference, the ability haste, and being able to cast that once or twice in a fight, and that can make or break the fight. So, yeah, typically it's still just going to be Shirelia's as a much, much higher win rate than anything else. Even with the Moonstone buffs, it's, 3% inferior to Shirelia's, so you still just want to be going for the Shirelia's in the vast, vast majority of situations. And then after that, you do have some options, all of which are pretty solid. Mikhail's is good for, cleansing CC and protecting people. Redemption's good for team fights. Staff of Flowing Water is very good if you're going to be buffing up people that... benefit greatly from ability haste, so stuff like Ezreal, Samira, other caster types of champs that can be good. And if you do want to pair her together with a Kog'Maw, a Twitch, or any of those other on-hit champions, Ardent Sense are still really good and underappreciated in a lot of circumstances. And then, of course, you have your Grievous Wounds with Chemtech Purifier. So, not a lot going on there that's new. Just same old, same old. Shrelia is really strong, very good with hyperscalers. She's just gone down a little bit in win rate overall just because of the nerf to Shrelia's, but it's still going to be your best option with her. Okay. Rakan, everybody knows I love Rakan. I do think that he is kind of on an upswing lately. You are seeing him again in Pro. Not as much in NA and Europe, but he is getting played in LCK and some other regions. So on this recent patch, now this is not 11.14, this is 11.13, but I think that is after the Shirelia's nerf, which was last patch. So that a 58% win rate, highest win rate champion. As far as like, lots of games, 45 games, 58% win rate. So I get a lot of people asking me, do you think Rakan is really that good? We know you love Rakan, but is he actually good? It's like, yes, he is actually good. I mean, at high level play, definitely. But even I think at mid level play, he's still all right? He's got like a 50% win rate, and that's kind of where he always is. Even in like his most OP of OP states, he wasn't much higher than 51, maybe 52%. He's just one of those champs like a Thresh who is really hard to play, and that's just always going to drag his win rate down a little bit. But he's extremely versatile. I mean, that's the name of the game with Rakan. He can engage, he can peel, he scales decently well, certainly better than a Leona or a Nautilus because he uses AP ratios and he has plus healing and shielding, but he also has a really good engage. So he doesn't scale as much as like a Lulu or a Yuumi, but he does more than Leona or Nautilus. So he's kind of in the middle there. And the thing with him is just his extreme mobility just opens up so many opportunities for you. You can get that deeper vision in the jungle and then get away if you get spotted, just Wing over a wall. You can take engages that are lower percent plays and not get punished for them as much. If you just go in with the W, your team doesn't go in, no problem. You just go back out with your E most of the time. So he can just take more risks than other champions and not get punished for it as easily. And so I think that makes him one of the premier playmakers out there. Versus if you go in on a 50-50 play with Leona and your team, doesn't follow up, or with Nautilus, your team doesn't follow up, it can just be disastrous, right? But with Rakan, if your team's asleep and they don't follow up, it's not great, but it's better for him than for other people because usually you can get out. So it opens a lot of opportunities. He's also really, really hard to gank in the lane. He's one of the safest laners. So if you're going to get camped or you just have a really weak situation in lane, then he's going to be very safe. He can, dodge blitz hooks. He can maneuver around dives really well. So he's got all of that going for him. And there are a lot of different builds you can go on him. More people have been going back towards the mobility boot roaming style of play, but I still think that Ionians are good. It just all comes down to how much are you going to roam. Are you going to be roaming a ton early on because your lane's just getting smashed, or you have really good opportunities for kills in the mid lane? Or are you just going to be chilling in lane looking for kills every time your ult is up? So I think if you can win your lane and if you can get, have a really good chance of getting a kill or a flash every time your ult is up, I would go for Ionians because it's going to give you more ults. And the rest of your abilities are a really long cooldown, kind of like Lulu. Your E and your W only get down to 12 seconds. So ability haste has an outsized advantage for you compared to a lot of the other stats out there. And compared to other champions like a Leona, right, whose Q is like a 5-second cooldown and her E goes down to like a 6-second cooldown, she doesn't need ability haste as much. It's good, but it's really those champions that have those, 10 to 15 second cooldowns on basic abilities. Those are the ones that really, really want the ability haste, and he's one of them. So I still like Ionian if you're doing all right in lane, but if you're getting dumpstered and you really need to roam, or if they have a really dangerous split pusher and you're just going to have to like be running around the map all the time late game, mobility boots can be pretty good as well. I would not get the defensive boots. I know the Leonas and Nautiluses, it's become fashionable to get plated steel caps, but if you're positioning properly, you should not be getting hit that much as Rakan. So unless they have a Zed that's like 8 kills or something, maybe you have to get, the steel caps, but other than that, I just wouldn't do it. And then Shirley's is still going to be your best bet. That's what all the pros are getting, and the movement speed is still very nice. And even that second ability, the Motivate, just being able to move around and give people that little bit of bonus movement speed is very, very nice later on in the game. Now, I did try out this Proto Belt build. I know people had suggested that in chat, because it does have a really high win rate at like 58%, and I found that this build actually is quite good if you have a kill lane, and you're going to dominate that lane. So if you have like a Draven or a Jhin or something like that early and you can hard dominate, I do like this. But like a lot of other AP champions, we'll talk about it in a little bit, excuse me, the cost of the item just puts you so far behind if you don't get a couple of kills and assists during the laning phase, because it's 3,200 gold. Now, yes, it is still valuable. It has way more AP than something like a Shirley's or something like a Mandate. It's got 50 more AP. So it does pay for itself. It is cost efficient, but it just puts you behind tempo-wise, behind a lot of other champs. So Rocket Belt, it is nice. It does add the extra damage. And really the thing that I found so useful is, especially if you get that early kill or that early assist, is just being able to get the alternator for that extra 60 damage, that 1,050 gold component there. The 2 amp tomes are a great build path, and then that just adds so much extra burst onto your level 6. With Ignite, you can just do a surprising amount of damage to people just off of that item. So it's a very, very good snowball item, and this is really the only sort of mainstream item you can use to get that. You can also get it with Night Harvester if you want to try that out, but anyways, I did try it out. I did have some success. I went like 5 or 6 games in a row when I first started doing it. Then I started losing some games when we weren't so far ahead. So it just really is a snowball item, but it is on the table. The penetration is not as good for him as it is for other champs because it doesn't do anything to help your shields out or your heals. But it is nice for damage, so it's okay. But I would only do it if you're just hard dominating. So you could start off early with an amp tome if you're not sure if you want to go Shirley's or that, if you have an early back, and just kind of feel it out from there and just see how hard you're dominating. Moonstone does have a pretty good win rate. I personally would not get this. There's a low sample size. You want the fights to be over pretty quickly as Rakan, so I wouldn't go with that. I do think I have tried out Locket, and although it has a lower win rate, I think there is a time and a place for this. If they have a lot of AoE damage or a lot of burst damage and you just need to protect people, Locket can be pretty good, but he does scale really well with AP, really well with plus healing and shielding, and it doesn't have any of those stats on it. So it's an okay item, and I would only get it very situationally. Mandate, I think, is really undervalued. If you do want the burst damage, but you want something that's affordable at 2,500 instead of 3,200, I really like the Mandate on it. It doesn't have the alternator, so you don't get that pop, that immediate power spike as soon as you finish the alternator. But once you complete the item, if you do want more burst damage, this gives quite a bit. I mean, people forget just how much damage this offers, right? By the time you complete it, it's probably going to be 45 up front and then another 120 from your allies. That's like 165 proc damage, which is more than Proto Belt, and it's going to be more than Night Harvester. So it's a lot of damage. You just your ally has to follow up and get that hit, and you get the extra 20% movement speed for 2 seconds for you and your ally. And it's only a 6-second cooldown, so you might actually be able to 4-second cooldown rather. So you might actually be able to trigger it twice in a lot of fights. And you can trigger it on multiple targets at the same time pretty consistently. So this was his go-to item a long time ago before it got nerfed, but now that Shirley's got nerfed a little bit, I think that people, maybe need to explore this a bit more. If you want the affordable item that gives you that extra kill threat to snowball, or your team just is going to need a bit more damage, I think that it can be quite good. A lot of pros are not getting it. Everybody's getting Shirley's. but I think that that's still respectable in some circumstances. And finally, I have tried this out, Everfrost. It is pretty good to chain it together. It's useful. It does not have the alternator power spike like the Hextech does, but once you complete it, being able to chain CC and hold someone there for a really long period of time is very nice. It's just the power spike. This is kind of the worst in terms of timing because it's very expensive and it does not have that, 1,000 gold power spike in it to sort of propel you to be able to afford that extra cost, to snowball some extra kills for you. So I'm really not a fan of that item. It's cool. It worked out. I tried it in a couple of games, but so most of the time, in other words, just TLDR, default to Shirelia's, and then these other ones are situational. I think Mandate is the one that would come up the most if you just want more damage but a cheap item. Then after that, you just have a ton of options. I think Staff of Flowing Water is a really good default one. It doesn't have the ability haste on it, but if you have Ionian Boots and if you're taking Ultimate Hunter, which is what a lot of people are taking, you're already going to have a ton of ability haste. So the components are pretty lame. Forbidden Idol and those amp tomes are kind of bad, but once you complete it at 2300, this can give your entire team that extra bonus AP and the extra ability haste. So if you have a bunch of casters on your team, again, something like Ezreal is going to be good, Diana, Orianna, just a lot of these other champs, that really want the ability haste, then it can be a very good item. And especially if you take Font of Life, which everyone should take after Guardian, then you can apply it to the whole team. Whenever you CC someone, if they auto attack that person, then they get the buff pretty much continuously refreshed as long as that Font of Life stays on them. So I think it's still quite good. The default, a lot of people are going to get is Zeke's. It does make you a little sturdier, and it does give a single target person a lot of extra damage whenever you trigger it on them. So that is pretty good. Again, if you want to go for those kill lanes, you want that extra damage, especially if you have someone who attacks really quickly, who can, get a lot of value out of that, like Kog'Maw, Jinx, that type of stuff. It's going to be really good. Anyone with Hurricane is going to love that because it can trigger on multiple targets at once. It does say attacks. Yeah, it's on hit. So, stuff that works with on hit like Twitch's Ultimate, Hurricane, those types of things are going to synergize really well. So that's what a lot of people are going to get. But I think Staff is still good. I think the Putrefier is good. If your team is really not getting Grievous Wounds and you need it, you're one of the best people who can get it, especially if you have a caster ADC like a Samira or an Ezreal. They really don't want to get Executioners. Some of the on-hit or just like attack speed type of champs, Executioner's not that big of a deal because you can just get Mortal Reminder because you're going to be building a lot of crit anyways. But, someone who's not going for those 3 crit items, it is pretty annoying to have to get Executioners. And a lot of AP champions just are not going to want to get Morello. It's pretty bad compared to other items. And then a lot of tanks, like Thornmail's okay, but they have to actually attack the person with Thornmail. So really, if you can get Putrefier, you are one of the best candidates to get it. And it does have pretty nice components. It's got the mirror in it, and then the finished item is pretty solid. So, you should heavily consider getting this second if your ADC is not going to get Executioners. Be sure to either ask them or tab and look before you start building it to see if anyone else has Grievous Wounds, but that's a good option. And then I think third, just getting the box, the Watchful Wardstone, if you can afford it, is nice. If you can't, if you only have like 800 gold, you could just go ahead and get a Forbidden Idol and then turn it into something like Redemption later, or Staff of Flowing Water if you didn't get it second. It just kind of depends on where the game is, but I think this item is pretty respectable. If you're level 13 and you're going to get it as third item, it could be pretty good. Anyways, okay, so that's just Rakan. My learning now, I play Rakan all the time, and I have the most insights on him, I think, and trying out all these different builds. So probably spend a bit more time than I should on Rakan, but I think people expect me to spend a lot of time on Rakan. Anyways, Leona, still same old thing. Her win rate has dropped a pretty decent chunk in both professional play and solo queue, but she's still the best, like, hyper-aggressive support in town, in my opinion. Just level 2, very heavy kill threat. You can go through the minion wave with your E, huge stun, pretty big damage early on with your Sunlight procs, especially with Ignite. Pairs extremely well with the Tristana, Jinx, just anything that can put up big damage early. And so she is one of these solutions to a lot of these enchanters. If you can just get on them and kill them early or bully them out, she's definitely really good. Her play rate has gone down a lot. I almost never see her anymore. But she is going to be one of the best at a lot of those other types of champ. If you want one of those hard engaged champs in your repertoire. So pretty much lock it every single time on her, and then after that it's, you know, Zeke's the vast majority of the time, and then you could get that other new item sometimes if you want to. This Anathema's chains. There you go. But yeah, Zeke's has the highest win rate. That's going to be the best most of the time. You can go Thornmail as well. Again, that means that the enemy has to actually auto attack you to get the Grievous Wound. So I don't think this is that useful. I mean, it's okay. I just feel like Zeke's is going to be your best bargain. I know that's kind of the lame answer, but I do think that, like I said earlier, Abyssal Mask and Frozen Heart are really disrespected. If they have a lot of AD or a lot of AP on their team, these items provide some really nice auras for your team. And I mean, look at those win rates, right? Like 69% here, 65% here. So, I mean, the standard Zeke's is 64. But this is very good. It gives that extra 15% damage for 5 seconds to everybody that you're able to CC, which is very nice. And then Frozen Heart is fantastic. It's just that aura just slowing everyone's attack speed. If they have an AD middle, an auto attacker middle, or an auto attacker top, or jungle, or whatever, if they have 2 or 3 auto attackers, Frozen Heart can be fantastic. And you do get an extra benefit from having a lot of armor on Leona, because that buffs up your W, it buffs up Aftershock, so you have a lot of synergy with stacking armor on her. If the team comp, you know, you see a good opportunity for it in your team comp. So the mana is not insane on her. You already have pretty low mana cost. That's always been the problem with Frozen Heart, is you're paying a ton for the mana. I really wish they would lower the mana to like 200 and give it some better stats. Maybe give it a little health would probably be OP. But give it a little something else, like 10 extra armor, take off 100 mana, give it 10 armor, or something like that. Okay. But anyways, it is what it is. She's still very strong. I would probably go Ionians most of the time just to roam and try to make plays, because her ult's on such a low cooldown. It's like a 90-second cooldown. You should be able to roam around the map and dominate. And, you know, I guess people are trying out this Biscuits, Time Warp Tonic. That does help you with all-ins early on. I still think that going for something like Cheap Shot Ulti Hunter or Ghost Poro Ulti Hunter is also extremely good, because it just allows you to run around and make more plays, which is good. Because you should be able to get a flash or a kill every time your ult's up if you're using it well. And then Thresh, still going to be pretty solid. They did nerf something about him a couple of patches ago. I think it was maybe just that Shirelia's build. I'm not sure if he's still... Yeah, he's back on the Locket train primarily, but Locket Redemption was still really good before Shirelia's was super OP. Shrelia still has a higher win rate, so I guess it's still good to go if you want to get that. But Thresh is just super versatile. Not a lot new here. You know, he's good at offense with his hooks, being able to lantern in people to follow up. And he has really good defense too, you know, with his ultimate being able to peel a lot of these bruisers that are popular out there. Then, of course, you've got your Flay. And one of his big claims to fame is just that his hook is on such a low cooldown. If you continually hit it on people, you know, it can get down to like 3 or 4 seconds once you get a lot of ability haste. So lots and lots of uptime on that hook. You just have to make sure you're hitting all of them, pretty much, in order to get the most out of him. Now, I have found when he's against other tanks, it can be really rough in the late game because you don't have any access to the backline other than just catching people out of bushes or people just not paying attention or whatever. You have a hard time getting through tanks, and that's what I've kind of learned when I tried to play Thresh a little bit last week and did all right, but did not have a great win rate on him. It's just if they have something like a Lulu Kog'Maw and any sort of front line, you just feel completely helpless late game because, you know, your little disruption, your Flay, and your little hook on their tank and stuff like that just isn't going to do anything. They're just going to sit there and just free fire and kill you. So it's really, really hard to get that Jinx or get that Kog'Maw unless you come from a flank. And even then, you just pretty much have to run at them and flay them, right? Like, you can try to do an open field hook, but it's so easy to dodge that. So he can be very dominant in the early game if you're landing those hooks. He has a lot of tools, but as the game progresses, if you're not really far ahead and your team doesn't have any backline access, you can just get snowballed on really hard by a lot of these ranged hyper carry champs with the Lulu, with the Yuumi, that type of stuff. So you can punish those champs early if you hook them a lot or pressure them out and, you know, the Kog'Maw falls behind by like 40 CS and you manage to kill the Lulu once or twice. Like, you can definitely stall it out and create a window, you know, for you to win, but you really have to push your advantage with him hard because he just doesn't have that backline access, right? Unlike something like a Leona where you can ult and it goes, you know, nobody can block it. It's just going to hit whoever it's going to hit, right? Unless they flash. And then your E goes through everybody and can get on that back line. So you can be a pest with that, right? With Nautilus, you can press R if you can get close enough. 800 range on that back line, it's going to hit them. No matter what, unless they hourglass, it's going to hit them. And they can still block your hook, but at least you can knock them up. And then, of course, you have Rakan, who can just run through everybody, assuming you don't get CC'd. And then he can knock up that back line and disrupt them a little bit. So Thresh doesn't have any of those tools. It's just straight up, like, you either hit him with the hook or you don't. A lot of times. So he's good at peeling. He's good at catching somebody and starting a fight. It's just, is it going to be a tank or not? If they have like an all squishy team where they have like 3 or 4 targets that are all really good hook and kill targets, then he's very good. But against like a Leona or a Nautilus or some of these other thick champions that can, you know, gum up the front line, it can be a big problem. Okay. So Zyra has been coming into favor. She's kind of the flavor of the last couple of patches. I think her win rate's down marginally this patch, but she has been quite good. So she's 52%. The main catalyst here is just that they lower the cost of her core item by 200, which is significant. Going from 3,400 to 3,200 allows her to power spike much faster. She still takes a lot longer to get to 3,200 than 2,500, as I always say. But if you can snowball early, then it's a lot easier to get to where you want to be. Now, there's saying Electrocute. I really don't like that on her. I'd rather have Comet or Dark Harvest. I'm not sure what the win rate is there. I guess Electrocute does have a much higher win rate. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to try it. And the problem is your trade pattern early a lot of times is just hit them with the Q plant and then auto attack. I guess if you hit your Q, the plant hits them, and you land that auto, it will trigger Electrocute. So maybe that's what it is. But anyway, she just has great harassment early on with the Q plants, huge range on that harassment. She can't harass under towers really effectively, which is a huge sort of knock on her. It's that the towers will just kill the plants basically immediately. So that is kind of rough. They did lower the cooldown on her W a few patches ago as well, which is pretty significant. But my main critique with Zyra, other than having expensive items right now, is that without plants, you feel pretty worthless, and your plants are still on a very long cooldown. It's like 16 seconds at level 1. And you just don't do anything without the plants. So you do a lot of burst, and you can poke really well, but the availability of the plants is extremely limited. And you have to choose whether you want to put points in your W so you have more plants up faster, or you want to put points in your Q so that you actually do damage, with your Q. So it's kind of a tough choice there, and you don't get any other benefit from leveling up W other than shorter cooldown on the plants. It doesn't give you more damage on the plants or anything like that. Back in the day when Zyra was really good and was played in Pro some in like Season 3 and 4, it was because her plants gave you up to 20% cooldown on all of your abilities. Not just the plants, but on everything. And that would actually be pretty solid if it did that. And there were other things that were really good about her too back then. But anyways, I think at gold and lower, she can be very good if you can punish people, poke them out early, and then she has that really good kill threat with her W. And if she does get the gold, her items are very strong. The double burn items are quite good. Even later on to the game. Even if you're behind, if you can catch people out, you can kill them. But you're still going to be vulnerable to flanks in the mid game if they have assassins or people with a million dashes, which is everybody in 2021. Then you can still die. You do have the E to kind of protect yourself, but it's very slow, it's very telegraphed, and if somebody dodges that, then you're just wide open. So that's a problem, and you really can't start fights. Like, your E is so slow that you really have to wait for people to come into you, and then you peel them. So she is very good at peeling and putting out tons of damage, but she's very bad at initiating and snowballing games and really taking over by herself. You do have very good bush control. Your plants do provide excellent vision, and they are not shut out by control wards. And she has a really long auto attack range. It's 575, I believe. They may have nerfed it to 550, but I think it's still 575. And so you can, knock out the enemy control wards really well, and you don't have to place like, you don't have to walk your wards forward. You can use plants to get vision of the bush, and then you can just walk forward. So, in other words, she can put much deeper wards up because she doesn't have to use those incremental wards to step up her vision. She can use the plants to move the vision forward and then drop the wards deeper where she wants them. So she has excellent vision control, especially for, you know, a squishy caster type of champion, which usually that's a huge downfall, is that later on in the game, squishies have a hard time getting vision. That's, if you never realize that, that's pretty much why they always run tanks in pro, is so that you can control vision and not get one shot right if you have to face check something later on. That's why you always see Leona, Tom, Braum, Nautilus, all that stuff late game. So she has a lot of advantages, but she still has some weaknesses. So I think if you can kill, if you can get those snowballs, if people are not going to respect darkness, and you can just kill them out of bushes later on in the game, I think she can be very strong. Or if your team just really needs an AP threat, she's a pretty good candidate. But she still does, you know, have some of the persistent problems she's always had. But if you do dominate snowballs, she can be really solid. Okay, Yuumi is still going to be really strong, and I think very underappreciated right now in this patch. Kind of like Thresh and Rakan, she is hard to play, believe it or not. And so that's why her win rate is always going to be around like 48 to 50%. You know, some people think it's because she's so dependent on her team that you just can't control the game, and she's just very coin flippy. There's some of that at play, but it really is, you know, primarily that it's very easily to get baited with her than almost anybody else. Like, you have to learn how to abandon ship. If you're attached to somebody and they're doing something stupid, you got to leave. You got to jump off and run and just not die. And, you know, you can't really run around by yourself in darkness. You have to stay attached to people, and you have to identify who's smart, who's making good decisions, and play around that person. She has the tools to do that, right? Because her W gives bonus AD or AP, and then she gives movement speed, attack speed, and healing, you know, on her E, and then her ultimate just being able to root, AoE root, you know, all kinds of people is very strong. So I think that she is versatile in the sense that she can be good in almost any situation. You just have to have someone that can carry on your team, and then you amplify that by a ton. So I think that she is extremely good in the right kinds of situations. You do have to be very careful. If you're going to get totally wrecked in lane, then she can be really bad, especially if they have a Leona or Thresh or something else where you can't go up and auto attack. That's really going to be a feels bad. But against most other enchanters, she's going to be pretty decent. Lulu's actually kind of problematic because Lulu can just polymorph you if you try to walk up and auto attack her, and that shuts off your ability to reattach to somebody for 5 seconds. It's really bad. But kind of like, you know, kind of like with Lulu, she's just really good with stuff like Jinx, Kog'Maw, and especially invisible champions like Twitch and Eve. Extremely powerful because when you attach, you get the invisibility also. So, very good, heavy snowball champ. And the thing is, a big thing that people don't appreciate about her is she has even cheaper items, because she effectively is going to have like a 1600 gold mythic, because you don't have to buy boots. So you don't have to spend, you know, 950 gold on boots. So you get a really, really fast mythic. I think it's still going to be Shirelia's, although maybe it's back to Moonstone. Looks like maybe Moonstone on her. It's basically the same. But yeah, you'll get one of these two items. I really like the Shirelia's because when you're trying to rotate around the map with somebody, you can hop off with your W, then hop back on, and that triggers the second part of Shirelia's for the 25% movement speed. So just every time your reattach is off cooldown, you can just keep doing that, and it doesn't cost any mana, just to zip around. And then in team fights, you can keep jumping around to different people and giving them that movement speed. So I still think Shirelia's is very strong on her. But yeah, super strong champion. It is situational, but it's, if you do not close her out, kind of like Lulu, she will take over the game. You know, unless like absolutely no one is doing well on the Yuumi's team, everybody's just playing off meta trash champions, and everybody's 0-10. She's gonna find a way to have a big impact in the game. So if you let her get to 2 or 3 items, so I think she is very, very strong, and she doesn't get punished like other enchanters. That's why she was one of the only enchanters in recent years to be very consistently strong in pro, in the support role, is because you can't kill her late game. You can't target her. She's not that squishy bullseye, you know, for hooks or for Zeds or whatever. Not that Zed's been super popular in Pro lately, I guess, but she does not have that vulnerability that something like a Lulu or a Janna or a Karma is going to have late game, because she can just attach to a tank. And in Pro, when you can attach to a tank like that, they can help you walk up and get vision. So you don't have to be a Braum or a Tom or a Nautilus in high-level play, because the tanks will help you go get the vision. But anyways, even in solo queue, I think she's still quite good. Even at lower ranks, I think she's very good. You know, just attached to the 10 kill Darius in silver, and the game's pretty much won. If you play Yuumi. So anyways, I still think she's pretty good. Now, Maokai has fallen down a little bit. I did play him yesterday. I wasn't super impressed, but I did kind of screw up the runes. I was talking to the chat and didn't get the correct runes, and our team was just really bad, and we got stomped anyway. So it's probably not a good representation of where he is right now. But I still think he can be pretty good. It's just, against enchanters, it is sort of rough if they just heal through your seeds late game. Because the big part about Maokai that's strong is just, I think, at his best as a support is you go to the Comet build, you max seeds, and you just put seeds in all the bushes everywhere. You get a ton of vision that also serves as, like, really heavy poke damage. But if they have a Soraka that just heals through it, or a Sona, or a Lulu that's close by the 80 carry or whatever, and they can just shield through it, that's problematic. And there's just so much healing in the game too, with so many Conquers and shield bows and all that kind of stuff, that a lot of times people can just heal through the poke too. So it is somewhat comp dependent, but I think that is still a really good build. It makes great use of Mandate and Demonic Embrace, so that's still a way you can play him. But they also did just buff Dead Man's Plate a little bit. The movement speed being 40 instead of 60 definitely matters on Maokai, but you can still go for the tank Maokai build, which is pretty good. And you can rush either Dead Man's Plate, you could go Locket, or you could go Turbo Chem Tank and still be effective, because he has a ton of CC. So you still get the free vision even if you go for the tank version. The seeds are not going to hurt as much, but you still get a lot of free vision. You have a point click, 1.5 second root. You have a massive hitbox ultimate, that can CC people for up to 2.5 seconds. You've got a displacement with your Q if timed correctly that can stop movement. So there's a lot of things that he brings to the table if you want to play him as support. So I think either as a tank version or an AP version, he can still be pretty strong. So I would not count him out. He still has like a 52 or a 53% win rate. I just dropped him down just a little bit just because it does seem like there is more counterplay coming in. And kind of like what I talked about with Thresh, is you just really don't have any access to the backline, and you simultaneously don't buff up your carries that much. And you don't apply a ton of lane pressure. You do have some, right? Especially if you go for kind of the tank version, you can, flash in W and fight them. And, if you have a stronger ADC, if you have like a Tristana or something early game, you can get those kills. But it's not going to be as lane oppressive as Zyra. It's not going to scale as hard as Lulu or Yuumi, and it's not going to have the same kind of backline access as Leona or Rakan. So that kind of puts you in a weird place, sort of like Thresh, where you have a lot of utility, you have a lot of different builds you can get, but you don't have the backline access, and you don't have the scaling. Thresh is more lane dominant than Maokai is, but anyways, I still think that Maokai definitely can be good in a lot of different situations. Very good blind pickable champion. If you're first pick and you just don't know what to play and you're afraid you might get countered, he's pretty good because he can go tank, he can go AP, and he's also a flex pick. So they may not know that he's going to be support. They might think he's going to be top lane. So he does have a lot of things going for him. It's just, he's almost like a Swiss Army knife, right? He's not the best at any one of those things I just mentioned, but he's like pretty decent at a lot of them. Okay. Alistar's another one who's a little underappreciated. I don't know how he's been doing in Pro lately. All right, at 52%. And the main thing that I like about Alistar is he does have the backline access. He's probably the best flanking support, because if you can get in and get behind somebody, not only can you CC him, but you can headbutt him back into your team with the W. So if you can, headbutt that Samira, back into your team, assuming she's not ready to go off with her ult, all that stuff. But if you can just get someone who's vulnerable and bump them back into your team, that is very nice. And then he can just run straight up the middle too and just WQ people, which is very nice. But another thing that I like about him too is he's very good against a lot of these poke champions. I've just seen so many like Karmas, Zyras, Xeraths, Vel'Kozes. So many people are playing poke, at least in my games, and he's the best tank against that because he has the built-in heal. So he already has really high, magic resist, health, and just standard health regeneration. But he also has that roar every so often, every wave or two, where he heals a little bit extra as well. So that does make him very good for a hard engaged champ against poke. I think he's going to be one of the best. So that is very nice. And he's one of the premier roamers too. You just get those Moby boots, you could make plays in mid, sometimes even top. If you have like an Ezreal or something bottom, it's excellent because then he can just farm while you go roam if you want to. So really good roam potential, very good all-in potential, great sustain in the lane. He really doesn't do a ton late game. Your engage costs you 2 normal abilities, and your E is kind of, it's okay late game, but he does have some problems scaling compared to some of the other champs. And his CC is a little bit on the low side compared to some other ones in like an all-in engaged situation. And it's really long cooldowns too on your Q and your W compared to like a Leona. So he's all right. I think that he can be pretty solid, but he's very good at just like locking down and homing in on that one target you wanna shut down. He's good at that. Obviously, very, very good at early game dives too. That's his other sort of specialty, is if you can get the jungler down there when you're level 6, you can just tank the tower for days with your ultimate. So that is really handy. Classic Alistar early tower dive. Okay. Sona, I still think is pretty good. People are asking me on stream about Sona and what I thought about her, and some people really thought she was terrible, and some people thought she was awesome. The bottom line is at Platinum Minus, which is really what this tier list is targeted towards, like Silver to Platinum, she's still just going to be guaranteed power in the late game. Yes, she can get bullied and all end early, by something like a Leona, so you have to be careful. But against other enchanters or other poke champions, she can scale super well in the late game, especially if you have a couple of tanks on your team. She can do very well. So the thing that I always say about her is if you can get off like 2 or maybe 3 Ws, then the fight's over most of the time. So that means like a 5-second fight or so, then you're just going to win. If nobody's died within 5 seconds, then you just win. Because her overwhelming advantage with the W and putting out these AoE shields and the AoE damage with her Q, it's just too much. It's just too many stats. It's just too much power for a lot of team comps to handle. So she's very, very good in front-to-back 5v5 team comps where you have 1 or 2 really solid tanks that can protect you and peel. She's just going to be very, very solid. So she's just a huge stat stick, very simple to play. It's nice if you can get the green shot on people with your passive to do that little mini exhaust, but even if you don't do that, just roll your hand across the keyboard, cast all the spells, make sure you hit your ultimate on somebody important, and you'll probably just win the game if it goes to like 25 minutes. So I think she's my pick for the overall 5v5, just hard scaling, especially if you have tanks. She's very good. So Lulu's really good in like buffing up a single target offensively to go in there, and just dominate. But Sona's really good at distributing, smaller buffs to everybody on the whole team. So I think she's very good. Now, the Moonstone buff was really solid for her. She's one of the main beneficiaries of that, but Shirelles is still going to be very solid as well. If you do want to play Soraka, I think I had Soraka a little bit lower, but they're basically interchangeable. Soraka heals up a single target faster than Sona does, and she has more global presence. But Sona does have that AoE stun, which is huge in a lot of team comps. She's going to be a little bit faster and just more guaranteed power, right? So, like, Sona's auras don't miss, but you can miss with Soraka Qs. So that's the main thing. But I think if you like Soraka and you like Sona, I think they're interchangeable in a lot of team comps, just depending on who you're better with. But I think Sona is just a little bit easier to execute on. Okay, and then Taric is kind of my pick for someone that I think might be rising up a little bit on this patch. We don't have a ton of data from Pro yet with these buffs to Taric. I did not think it was going to be that big of a deal. It's nice, the lowered mana cost, but last time I looked, he was actually doing pretty well. He's up at 51. I was hoping to get to maybe 52%. So you can pick Taric as like an anti-Leona or anti-Nautilus type of champ. So if they have slower, more predictable damage and the other team is opting into a 5v5 team fight, Taric can be very good at that in solo queue. I was talking about Taric the other day on stream too. The thing about Taric though is in solo queue he's just gonna get worked, I think, by stuff like Lulu, Sona, Soraka. I just think the enchanters are gonna be better because they just scale way better with AP and plus healing and shielding than he does. And he has to actually get in there and auto attack a lot in order to get, a lot of value out of him, which is going to make him vulnerable to getting hit. So he has to build defense as well because of that. So he has to get armor, he has to get health. So he just needs all of these extra stats versus stuff like the Lulu, the Sona, all of that. They can focus almost exclusively on buffing up your team with stuff like Ardent Sensors, Staff of Flowing Water, Redemption, Mikhail's. It's just a lot harder for Taric to opt into those types of items, or he's just going to get blown up. So Frozen Heart is very nice on him. I think he, on paper, like Locket into Frozen Heart is probably one of the best combinations. He's one of the best at getting that combination of items. So if they have a lot of AD on their team and a lot of divers, he can be very good. He is personally not going to get blown up, especially by AD champs like Zed, as easily. So, again, if they have a lot of AD, maybe he's better than a Sona or a Lulu who's afraid of getting blown up. So there definitely are places, but he's that combination. He's that unfortunate combination of other champions probably do most of what he wants to do better, and difficulty in execution because you have to hit that stun with your E, which is really close range. You can attach it to an ally, but they can always misposition and move and not get the stun. So he's okay. He just has a lot of problems going on with him, but I think in the right kind of team comp, just to keep everybody alive, have that, 5v5 team fight where your team's just going to hard win late game. So I think with someone like a Samira, he would be fantastic. Samira going off with his ult and, just having his protection while you're channeling that ult with your W. And then she's going to have shield bow and all of that to protect her. I think he's great with stuff like that. Obviously, with like a Master Yi that's fed, that's a classic combination that's really OP. So if you have really strong sustained damage on your team and you don't want to get picked off by an assassin, I think he could be really good. So there are spots for him. The buffs definitely did help him. I just think that there are probably better options, and it's similar to Braum. I may not have even, did I forget to put Braum on there? I don't even remember where I put Braum. No, he's down there. I think of him as almost interchangeable with Braum as well, where if you want a peeler tank who can sit back and protect your back line, that has some like good utility about him, I think that both of them can be good. It's just that enchanters again are going to try to do that type of thing, that 5v5 team fight thing, but they're just going to buff up your allies a lot more. So it's kind of like why I like Rakan versus, some of the other tanks, is that Rakan can get the scaling stuff, can get the things that help your team out, and he can just rely on his agility and positioning rather than having to get personal tanking stats. Versus these guys have to get personal tanking stats in order to survive. And Lulu and those types of champs, Yuumi, can just go all out on the scaling and the ally help because they don't have to get as many personal tanking stats. So it's just really a numbers thing. It's really a math thing. It's not that I don't like those champs. It's just you have to pay gold to cover, certain areas, certain defensive areas where the enchanters don't have to do that as much. Now, other tanks like Alistar and Leona, they make up for that because they can proactively make plays. They can engage. They can snowball. Their CC is really good. And, sometimes it doesn't matter how much scaling the Sona has. If you CC and blow her up, she's done, right? Versus with Taric and Braum, it's a lot harder to get that CC, especially on the back line. And that's why I like the engage tanks a lot more than I like the peeler tanks. And you see that kind of reflected also in Pro, where most people are playing the engage tanks, the Thresh, the Nautilus, the Leona. Braum is making a comeback, but that's why. It's just engage is at such a high premium. If you're going to play a tank, you probably want to play engage. So that way you can counteract the enchanters before they get too strong. Okay, last few and then we'll call it a day. Bard is about the same. I've had some people on the channel, cleanly, saying that he's really enjoying playing Bard. He thinks he's really strong. And he is. He's at like 52%. And I don't know, maybe I can try him out. I played him a couple of times. He's the type of champ where you really just want to play him a lot, in order to get every little trick master every trick that you can with him. But he still has the ultimate, great for making plays, excellent defensively or offensively. It is one of the only ultimates in the game that can actively, like, lose the game for you, though. Like, if you use that ult incorrectly, and, Zhonya's your ally, when they really did not want to be Zhonya's, that can be a huge issue. So you have to be very careful. So it's an extremely powerful tool. It's one of the coolest abilities in the game, just an AoE Zhonya's. But you have to be very careful with it. So it is really good. I do have a Bard guide, so if you want to know more about Bard and, different playstyles with him, be sure to check that out. But I think he has a lot of power. You just have to be very careful. And he is an excellent roamer, so that's really, his claim to fame. Kind of like Alistar, is you want to get those Moby boosts, you want to start roaming. He does have a good toolkit for getting into flanking positions with his magical journey, but also he needs to roam so he can pick up those chimes, because that's the main way that he scales his damage. So while you're picking up chimes, you might as well try to kill mid lane, pretty much, is the Bard mentality. So very good, excellent gank assists. His scaling is pretty weak, so kind of like a lot of other engaged tanks, you want to make sure you're making great use of his CC. But he can be pretty good. I think he's back on the Mobies. I guess Ionians are more popular. Both are pretty solid. And then just lock it the vast majority of the time, just because it just helps you out with team fights. You don't really need mana, because your chimes refund mana and all that. So he's going to be really solid there. I will note that Deadman's Plate did get buffed, and that is one of his favorite items. So that is very good for him on this patch. It looks like a lot of people are enjoying Anathema's Chains on him. I don't know about that. Maybe. If they only have, like, 1 or 2 heavy-hitting damage dealers and everything else is utility, like if they have, like, an Ivern jungle and a Lulu support and an Ezreal ADC, or something like that, I could see it, but I don't know. It seems pretty weak to me. And then I have seen more and more people doing Cosmic Drive. I don't know about this on Rakan. Like, it's okay, but his AP scaling is pretty abysmal. Like, the only ability that really does anything with AP is your Q, and I guess your auto attacks a little bit. And it's expensive, so I don't know. I guess you could. I haven't really tried that on Rakan. This actually could be pretty good on Rakan. It does have really nice components. Maybe think about that on Rakan, but on Bard, I'm not so sure. Frozen Heart is very good on him. I mean, just the tanky items are nice with him. His base stats aren't tremendous, but the fact that you have to get in close to land those auto attacks with the meeps, like 500 range, means you're going to get hit quite a bit. So the armor items are good. And then, of course, with Deadman's, that gives you better, roam potential and things like that. So that's why Deadman's is so good. It's the armor plus the roaming. But even Frozen Heart could be very strong. And traditionally, this has been a decent item in the last few years on him, just because, he wants the defense. So that could be a pretty good option if no one else on your team is going to get Frozen Heart. So I think that Bard can be pretty solid. Last couple here. Janna, pretty good, like, hard peel champion. I think most of the time I'd rather just have Lulu, but if Lulu is banned, Janna is good with a lot of your hyperscalers. She can't make any plays, really. So that's kind of a downside to her, but if all you need is just pure protection and peel for, your Kog'Maw, your Jinx, or whatever, she's a pretty good option. And then Nautilus is still pretty good. He is getting played a decent chunk in Pro right now. He has one of the lowest win rates of any of the tanks, though, at 47%. And a couple of things about Nautilus is, number one, he's really squishy compared to something like a Leona or like an Alistar. His base stats are lower. I think he's got like 36 armor at level 1 versus Leona's going to have 44. Braum's got like 44. Alistar's got 44. So he just has lower base stats. I think his health is a little lower as well. And his protection, so his W is much weaker than Leona's W in the early game. So I would rather just play Leona most of the time. He does have the guaranteed hit with his ultimate, which is really nice. People can dash out of Leona's ult or flash it or whatever, but they really can't get away from Nautilus. However, he can't, like, it's a lot harder. I guess in traffic, it's harder to hit your Q, is what I'm trying to say. It does have a fat hitbox, so in open field, it's really easy to hit that. It's got long range, fat hitbox, really fast cast time. But in traffic, you can't go through people, and you can't go over walls. It's one of the only hooks in the game where you can't go over the wall. So you can't make those plays from, like, hanging out in the river, going over the wall near the raptor pit to catch people. or just a lot of those other opportunities that other hook champions have. He's not going to have those. You can escape with the hook sometimes, but most of the time when you're going in, you're going to use your hook to go in. So, and most people are going to wait until you go in before they show themselves to counter gank you. So he does have the potential for escape with the hook. Smart people will also try to block you from being able to hook stuff. So they'll come in, and when they flank you, then they'll get behind you so that you can't hook to get away. But he does have really good AoE wave clear with his E. It is expensive mana-wise, but that can help you get priority for dragons, for scuttles, for roaming, all of that stuff. So that's nice. It's pretty good sustained damage in longer team fights. It can distribute Font of Life to all of the enemies. So that doesn't come up a lot, but it does give a little bit of extra healing. If for some reason you ever went something that can be triggered by a slow, so like a mandate or something like that, could be pretty good on him in theory, but a lot of people aren't going to do that on him. So he does have some unique properties to him. It's just his damage is a little bit lower, he's a little bit less tanky, and his backline access is mixed, right? The ult is excellent at backline access, but the Q is somewhat problematic. The knockup is very good too, and very relevant, you know, for Samira, Yasuo, just the fact that it's not affected by tenacity is very good. So he obviously has a lot of good properties to him. It's just that his win rate is lower, both in solo queue and in pro, and that's why. So that's why I'm explaining it. I know that we have some Nautilus lovers on the channel, and I have, you know, I've tried him out, and I used to play him a ton. It just feels like Leona's just better most of the time if you can get her. It's not much statistically, but it's just the cooldowns are way lower. It's just more damage, more tankiness in the early game, better chances for snowballing. I just think Leona's better for most people. But if you're a Nautilus expert, he can be pretty good. The Frozen Heart is fantastic on him because he is the one of the tanks who has the biggest mana problems if you don't get mana items. And Locket, of course, has no mana on it. So Frozen Heart is a very, very good follow-up. If your team needs that, it's excellent on him. That just allows you to spam your E and even max your E first and do quite a bit of damage in team fights. I really wish they'd lower the mana cost on that by, like, you know, 5 per level would just be fantastic, but I don't know if they're ever going to do that. Anyways, that's pretty much it. The last couple of notable ones that have moved. I think if you're an expert on Zilean, he can be very good right now at protecting against assassins, speeding up some of these bruisers that are very strong, you know, protecting your hyper carries like your Irelias and things like that. I would rather just run Lulu most of the time, but Zilean does have a really high win rate. It's undeniable. He is pretty strong right now if you're good on him. He doesn't get played a lot, but he can be good. They have buffed Seraphine a little bit recently, so she could be solid. I haven't seen her a ton lately. I think that Sona's probably better if you want that kind of thing, although Seraphine does have much larger range. So, I don't know. Maybe we have to try her out again, but she's okay. We already talked about Soraka, kind of interchangeable with Sona, just depending on what you prefer. Rel can still be pretty good. I've seen some high-end support still playing her. I just think her numbers are a little bit weaker than they used to be, but she can be solid. Not a huge believer in Senna, but if you pair her with a Caitlyn or a Jen or someone else who can poke really hard in the early game, she can be good. I think Divine Sunder is pretty solid on her. So she's alright. Her items are just very expensive. She can get flanked and dunked later, like I've talked about with a lot of these squishy type of champs that are lane dominant, like Zyra. She has that problem, but she can be alright. Blitzcrank, very good. If you land the hook, you're a god. If you don't land the hook, you're just worthless. Kind of always the same story with Blitzcrank. So excellent against some of these squishies if you can hit them, you know, particularly something like a Lulu or a Sona or something like that. Against tanks, he falls off quite a bit. But otherwise, he can be pretty solid. Nami, excellent harassment early. Can get flanked and destroyed later. You got to hit that bubble. There's a lot of mobility in the game right now, so a lot of people are going to be able to dodge that, but she could still be all right. Talked about Braum earlier. I think he's somewhat interchangeable with Taric if you want to peel or tank. He is rising in popularity in pro. His win rate is inching up, so excellent with something like a Lucian if you have that, or anyone else. A bunch of auto attackers on your team that can trigger those stuns quickly. That's good. Brand, interchangeable with Zyra. I still like Zyra because the plants give you better vision control and a larger poke radius, but Brand is still pretty solid as well. Karma, fairly overrated. I know people like Karma. She is very good with kind of push and poke with Ezreal in the bot lane, but her win rate is pretty bad in solo queue and pretty bad in pro. I know we're seeing her a lot in pro, but as a support, it's a 43% win rate, which is pretty abysmal. So she's okay, but I think there are going to be better choices. She also got nerfed this patch. And that's pretty much it as far as what I'll talk about. I will say Tom Kench is moving up a little bit, but I think he still needs maybe another patch or two for people to kind of figure him out and get good. But anyways, that's it. Have a good day, and we'll see you next time.